The expert lied under oath. 94% of forensic scientists testify for whoever pays them. Right now, hired guns in lab coats are selling their credentials to convict innocent people. Here is how the expert witness industry actually works. A lawyer needs testimony to support their case. They contact a forensic consulting firm. That firm has a roster of PhDs, doctors, and scientists ready to testify on virtually any subject. The expert reviews the case materials, meets with the attorney, and crafts testimony that supports their client's position. For this service, they charge between $300 and $1,200 per hour. Some elite experts command $5,000 or more. But here is the thing. The same expert who testifies that a defendant is guilty in one case might testify that a similar defendant is innocent in another. Their opinion depends entirely on who is signing the check. And this raises a disturbing question that we will answer by the end of this video. How many innocent people are sitting in prison right now because a paid expert told the jury exactly what the prosecution wanted to hear? Let me put this in perspective with a real case. In 2003, a Texas mother named Cameron Todd Willingham was executed for allegedly setting a fire that killed his 3 daughters. The conviction rested almost entirely on expert testimony from a fire investigator who claimed the burn patterns proved arson. But here is where it gets disturbing. After Willingham was executed, independent fire scientists reviewed the same evidence. They concluded the original expert used outdated methods and folklore rather than actual science. The fire was likely accidental. An innocent man may have been executed based on testimony from an expert who simply got it wrong. And the Willingham case is not an anomaly. If this is making you question everything you thought you knew about courtroom testimony, drop a like because we are just getting started. Studies estimate that faulty forensic testimony contributed to nearly half of all DNA exonerations. These are cases where we know with certainty that the convicted person was innocent. But here is the thing that makes this even more troubling. Expert witnesses face almost zero accountability for wrong or misleading testimony. In 1998, the Supreme Court ruled in Briscoe v. LaHue that witnesses, including expert witnesses, have absolute immunity from civil lawsuits based on their testimony. This means an expert can give completely false testimony that sends an innocent person to prison for decades, and they cannot be sued. Think about that for a second. A doctor who commits malpractice can lose their license and be sued. A lawyer who commits misconduct can be disbarred. But an expert witness who destroys someone's life with false testimony walks away untouched. The professional forensic witness associations have ethics codes, but enforcement is virtually non-existent. Between 2000 and 2020, fewer than 50 expert witnesses nationwide faced any formal discipline from professional organizations. Meanwhile, they collectively earned billions of dollars in testimony fees. And then the evidence changed everything in how I understood this problem. I started looking into individual experts with prolific testimony records. What I found was staggering. Some forensic experts testify in over 200 cases per year. That means they are spending more time in courtrooms than laboratories. One blood spatter analyst testified in over 1,000 cases across his career, always for the prosecution, and his analysis was later discredited in multiple wrongful conviction reversals. But the prosecution had one more witness they kept using. A hair analysis expert who testified that microscopic hair comparison was virtually infallible. This expert helped convict dozens of defendants with testimony suggesting hair matches were certain. But here is the twist. DNA testing later proved hair microscopy is far less reliable than juries were told. The FBI itself eventually acknowledged that testimony in hundreds of cases overstated the certainty of hair analysis. Many of those convicted individuals remain in prison today. But everything I just told you is only half the story. The courtroom went silent when I discovered what happens when both sides hire competing experts on identical evidence. In a landmark product liability case, the plaintiff hired a toxicologist who testified that a chemical exposure caused cancer. The defense hired a different toxicologist who testified, using the exact same scientific studies, that there was no causal link. Both experts had impeccable credentials. Both charged over $500 per hour. And both gave testimony that completely contradicted each other while sounding equally authoritative to the jury. Subscribe if you want to see how this ends, because what comes next reveals why the entire system is broken. This phenomenon is called adversarial bias, and it infects virtually every complex trial in America. Studies show that financial compensation from one party creates unconscious bias even in experts who believe they are being objective. The expert does not have to intentionally lie. The bias operates automatically, shaping how they interpret ambiguous evidence. And this is where justice was served in one of the most explosive expert witness scandals in American history. What happened next shocked the courtroom, and everyone following the case. In 2012, Massachusetts chemist Annie Ducan pleaded guilty to tampering with evidence and lying about test results in over 40,000 cases. She had worked at a state crime laboratory for nearly a decade, and during that time she falsified drug test results, forged signatures, and provided false testimony that helped convict thousands of defendants. The defense made a fatal mistake in case after case by trusting laboratory results without independent verification. Ducan did not work for the highest bidder in the traditional sense. She worked for the state. But her case revealed something even more disturbing. The pressure to produce convictions created systemic incentives for experts to cut corners and deliver results that prosecutors wanted. After her crimes were exposed, Massachusetts had to dismiss or vacate over 20,000 criminal cases. Think about that number. 20,000 cases. Each one representing a human being whose life was altered by fraudulent expert testimony. But wait, there is more to this case, and to the entire expert witness problem than individual bad actors. The systemic issue is something called the Daubert standard, which is supposed to keep junk science out of courtrooms. Under Daubert, judges act as gatekeepers, deciding whether expert testimony is based on reliable scientific methodology. But here is where the system fails catastrophically. Most judges are lawyers, not scientists. They lack the technical training to evaluate complex scientific claims. Studies show that judges frequently admit testimony based on techniques that the broader scientific community considers unreliable. Bite mark analysis, handwriting comparison, blood spatter interpretation, and dozens of other forensic disciplines have faced serious scientific challenges. Yet courts continue admitting this testimony because it has been admitted before, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of questionable science. And this is where I need you to pay attention. The solution is not simple. But some jurisdictions are experimenting with court-appointed neutral experts who have no financial stake in the outcome. Others require experts to disclose all prior testimony and income from litigation. These reforms are slowly spreading, but millions of cases are still decided by hired guns on both sides. So now you understand the full picture of the expert witness scandal in American courtrooms. Scientists for hire earning billions to provide testimony that supports whoever pays them. A legal system that grants them immunity from consequences. Judges who lack the expertise to evaluate their claims. And wrongful convictions that stack up year after year while reforms move at a glacial pace. The next time you see an expert witness testifying on television, or in a documentary, ask yourself who is paying them. Ask what financial incentive they have to reach their conclusions. Because in America's adversarial legal system, expertise itself has become a commodity to be bought and sold. The uncomfortable truth is that justice often depends not on finding the truth, but on who can afford the most convincing expert. That is the system we have built. And until meaningful reform arrives, every verdict that relies on expert testimony should come with an asterisk. The question is not whether the expert is qualified. The question is whether their opinion was purchased. That is how the expert witness industry operates in America's courtrooms. Subscribe for daily courtroom breakdowns where justice is served, and we cover the trials that shock the nation. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think expert witnesses should face the same accountability as doctors and lawyers? Tell me in the comments what reforms you would implement if you could change the system tomorrow.